Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Yep, that'd be me. How you doing? Welcome to the program. It's a Wednesday. It's I never know the date. It's the 11th.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
See, I did some quick arithmetic there. You don't know, but that I did. That was pretty impressive.
That was good.
Yeah. Seated next to me is the Vice President for Education of Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania. Did I get that right?
That was correct.
Okay,
that was correct.
but I didn't get your name yet. Right. Katie Horowitz, right? And I usually butcher, these kinds of appellations, but I didn't. I do know that that's what you do. And I think what I want to do this hour is to have some sense, because I don't think anybody has a clear idea of what Planned Parenthood is and or does. And I think out there in the general reality of the world, or unreality of the world, as it often is these days, people think, oh yeah, that's where you get abortions. Mm-hmm. A few other people think, oh no, that's where you can go for health screenings and to get contraception and this and that. Beyond that, I don't think anyone has a sense of what Planned Parenthood does and what its mission is. It's sort of been, like so many things have in this climate, been taken over and branded by people who wish Planned Parenthood dead, right? And even when I was looking for your phone number, I think I told you I was on the internet, and blah, 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 and up comes Planned Parenthood of Western PA, and under it said abortion provider, I think, or abortion clinic, I think it said. And I thought, what the hell?
Right. Yeah, because it's so loud in the news and so focused on that service, that's really what people think of, and there's a lot more. There's
so much more.
There's so much more, yeah.
So much more. And it doesn't, I don't know. Are you hearing us okay, Stephen? You're looking unhappy. Oh! I just took her tooth out.
My tooth's fine.
Is it? Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. Not chipped or anything. Excuse me while I maul the guest. Okay, so here's what I want to get to. So she's vice president of something called education. What? I'm just asking. What?
Should I say more?
Yeah, I really think you should, because
yeah,
I don't think I was aware that Planned Parenthood does all of this extraordinary work in the community.
Yeah, we do a lot of work in the community. So, one thing that I think is really interesting, I come from a public health background. That's where I come to this work from. And so, a lot of times people think of health or healthcare as just like, okay, you go to the doctor, you get sick, you go to the doctor. But there's so much more that's involved in prevention and in making sure that people have the information, the skill set, the things that they need, the confidence to figure out, how can I take care of my body? How can I take care of my health? How can I, know what I need to know to keep myself in good shape? And I think people don't think of that piece of health education as crucial to healthcare. But the truth is, if you don't know what questions to ask, if you don't have the basic information about how to take care of yourself, then you can't take care of yourself. You can't get what you need. So, I think what's really awesome and interesting and wonderful about Planned Parenthood is that not only are we a healthcare provider, so we have the healthcare facility where you can come and get healthcare the way that people typically think about it, but we also know how important that education piece is for helping people to feel the confidence to take care of themselves and feel like they know where to start really with this stuff. So, you know, that's sort of like, for me, that's part of where we come from, is giving people information and making sure that they know. And especially when you're talking about something like sexual health, it's so stigmatized. It's so hard for people to talk about it, that we can't just expect that people are going to be able to do that, you know, naturally, the way that we deal
Is that normal? I mean, in other countries, is that normal that, speaking of something so basic to human nature and survival, in fact, is what was the word you used? Uncomfortable or whatever. I mean, why? Don't you think in other countries they're more matter of fact about this stuff? Don't see it as I guess this is our Puritan past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? That's sex is shameful or something.
Yeah. When I came to this work, again, like, I came from public health. I came from this idea of, like, you got to get the population healthy. You know, you got to find ways to get to lots of people. And as I've worked, I've been at Planned Parenthood for about 5.5 years now, and I have come to think that shame is one of the biggest issues around health and around sexual health. I've come to think that, you know, everything else you can throw at it, if you don't deal with the shame part, you're not really dealing with it. You know?
Well, you're up against a culture.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah.
And you're up against then I lost my train of thought. No, I'm looking at you, but I'm screaming not at you. I lost my train of thought. Shame. So shame keeps people in the shadows.
Yes.
Shame. A person who's feeling shame does not reach out.
No. Yes.
And so this is what you're saying, is when somebody is frightened and shamed that maybe something has happened, but they don't know where to go, and they don't know, and they so often can't get beyond their shame, and the results are not positive.
They're terrible. They're really bad.
So so where do you do your educating?
So we are in a bunch of places. We're in over 30 schools and organizations. We're in middle schools, we're in high schools, we go to after school programs. We don't just work with youth, we mostly work with youth, but we also work with adults and providers. So we have, as of the past year and a half, we started a focus on violence prevention work, which we've always known that sexual health is related to sexual violence, obviously, and it's very important to work on that issue. But, you know, within the past year and a half, we've decided, okay, no, we need a real focus on this. So now we have an educator who's a violence prevention specialist. That's what he does. That's his whole job. And he works a lot with youth, but he also goes into addiction recovery facilities. And he goes into, like I said, after school programs. He works with providers. So we work with a whole range of people and a whole range of organizations.
I sometimes think that because Planned Parenthood has been so besmirched by a certain crowd, that a public school district would be uncomfortable allowing Planned Parenthood in, but
we're in there. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that the detractors can be loud, but that doesn't mean that they're the majority, you know. And a lot of people understand how important this education is, and they also understand how specialized it is. You know, a lot of the health teachers, they're wonderful. They're wonderful in their jobs. They're wonderful at teaching health topics, but sexual health is a very specific type of topic. You know, people ask me all the time, how do you talk about this so matter-of-factly? How are you able to just be so comfortable talking about it? And the answer is probably long, but you know, I am, and I'm trained in it, and I've done it now for a while, and the health teachers, deeply appreciate when we come, when we are able to give our time.
So they bring you in when they get around to sexual health. They bring you in.
Yeah, that's often. It's often the health teacher that brings us in. And of course, the administration approves of it, but the health teacher is often kind of the point of connection. Sometimes it's a social worker. Sometimes it's a guidance counselor who recognizes the need. And sometimes it's administration too. It's people who oftentimes, I think what happens is they notice negative attitudes amongst the youth. They might notice pregnancies. They might know that STDs, we just got statistics about STDs that they're on the rise again. And so, I think people that work directly with youth, they understand the need. They see how problematic it is when the kids don't have this information. And so when they find out that we do these services, they're usually they're just relieved and excited and really want us to come more than we can, usually.
Well, that's good to hear. But I keep hearing about, abstinence-only education. Where is that legislated? Is that something that, where you couldn't come in and say anything more than...
There are districts.
Don't do it.
Yeah, there are districts like that. Yeah, there are, and we fortunately around Allegheny County there really aren't a lot of districts like that. And since our education department is really focused in Allegheny County, we're not a big department. We're only 6 educators, really 5 that are doing direct teaching. And so we don't have a whole lot of capacity to go out into some of the rural areas to do education. We do a little bit, we do a little bit here and there, but I think those are the places where you're going to find more of the abstinence-only policies.
And that's probably where STDs are rampant and unwanted pregnancies are rampant, right?
Yeah, Texas is a really good example. You can just use Texas as a case study. A lot of the Planned Parenthoods closed down. They have abstinence-only policies all over the place. And those are Texas, when you look at, for example, teen birth rates, they've been on the decline. Everybody's been hearing this for 30 years. They've been on the decline. They keep declining. It's great. It's really, it's a good thing. And then you go to Texas and, Planned Parent, they had the legislation that forced all the Planned Parenthoods to close. They have these abstinence-only policies, and their teen birth rates have stagnated. I don't know that they're rising, but they have stagnated. Where
everywhere else, it's really
it's going down.
It's going down. I have some numbers here. Can I have my mic up a little? Thank you. In 2011, the unintended pregnancy rate hit a 30-year low. Mm-hmm. That's from today's New York Times.
Yep.
The teenage pregnancy rate and teenage birth rate right now are at record lows in the United States. And this is largely explained by the use of reliable and highly effective contraception.
Yes, correct.
Contraception. That brings us to something that's in the news.
Yes, it is.
So Health and Human Services has decided that the rule that was in the Affordable Care Act that all women were to be given all contraception free?
Employers had to cover contraception. Health plans through employers had to cover contraception, and it had to be free of a copay. Yes.
Okay, and what the Trump administration is going to do is tell any employer that for whatever reason, if they just don't like contraception,
right.
They don't have to.
Right. This is beyond, we knew about the religious exemptions.
This is beyond it.
This is beyond that.
Right.
This is any employer. Any employer can just decide not to cover.
You don't even have to be religious. You could just say, I object.
Yep.
So I am not going to provide this.
Yep.
And you know what? If you look at what they put out a 163-page document supporting this rule change. And some of what they say in here is that There is uncertainty. I'm going to quote this. There is uncertainty in the relationship between contraceptive access, contraceptive use, and unintended pregnancy. They are saying it's unclear whether access to contraception and use of contraception has any impact on unintended pregnancy. What?
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane.
I think any person who thinks about that for more than a second and a half would understand how could that be true? How could that possibly be true?
Right.
It's false. It's
just
false.
so false. It's a joke. So here's another thing in there, 163-page document filled with lies. It argues that contraception is associated with negative health effects.
False.
First of all, name me any drug, if you're taking any pill, that doesn't have some, it could be, the fine print at the end. You could have a little weight gain. You could have this. You could have that. There's not a pill in the world that doesn't potentially have a side effect.
But you don't call that negative health
No,
consequences.
you do not.
That's not what that's called.
Not at all. And here, too, the report says that enrolling families who object to contraception may affect risky sexual behavior in a negative way. In other words, if you give these kids contraception, why, they're going to just go around screwing like a bunch of bunnies.
100% false. That's all I can say. It's just
false.
Well,
this is in the New York Times today, and they say false, false, false. That's the piece is trying to, weed through the thicket of unbelievable misinformation behind this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's. It's hard to even know where to start. It's hard, when somebody's just telling a lie. It's really hard to even start to debunk that. But when you look at for example, in Colorado, they began providing the most effective forms of contraception, which are intrauterine devices and implants. They began.
Okay, wait, because a lot of people of a certain age, we knew from IUDs.
Yes.
Intrauterine. That's a strange-looking thing that is inserted and somehow prevents.
So
I don't know what it does. What the hell does it do?
Yeah, they're really interesting. So it used to be a weird squiggly shape.
It isn't anymore?
It's not. It's just a little T. When we do our classes, we do this. We mock the little T.
It's a T.
It's a T, and it just gets inserted in a person's uterus. There are hormonal ones, and there's a copper one, and they get inserted by a provider, and they stay there. They get inserted and they put their little arms out
and they say no sperm, no, you are not, and that works.
So the hormonal the copper one, actually, that's pretty much how
you
it
think
works.
That's
there are no hormones in the copper IUD. They don't fully understand
sperm don't like copper.
Right, sperm don't like copper. They confuse the sperm. It's really interesting. There are other ways that they work. They make the cervical mucus thicker. They work. They work.
Okay, and the other one you said implants. Now, there was no such thing when I was of childbearing age. What's an implant?
So the implant is just a little matchstick sized plastic device. It's a teeny tiny little, I'm trying to think of what I can compare to. A matchstick is the best you can compare it to. It's that big, and it's hormonal, and it gets inserted in a person's arm right about here. It's kind of like a big shot, it's not, it's not super painful. It's a little pinch, it's a little bit of pain, but it's not bad.
And then once it's in,
it just stays, and it stays for 3 years, and it over time just releases hormones, and it prevents pregnancy. It's super effective. It's over 99% effective. Very, very effective. And these have been now, there was a little question for a little while. Should these, especially IUDs, should these be used for people who haven't had children? Should these be used for teens? And now it's unequivocal. They are the most recommended form for teens who are comfortable with it, who it makes sense for, because they're so effective, and there's really no room for user error. You can't mess it up, And all of us, it's hard to take a pill every day. It's hard for anybody to take a pill. I have a hard time taking my vitamin every day.
I know. Well, back in the day, that was all. I mean, we had diaphragms. Does anyone use it? Does anyone use a diaphragm anymore?
No, not too. I mean, some people do. You can.
But it's
not as effective. That's the thing.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
I know of a lot of pregnancies by women who were religiously using diaphragms with spermicide, and they got pregnant.
Right.
So this idea that when people have an unwanted pregnancy, that they didn't use contraception, I hear that a lot too. Well,
I mean, contraception can fail. It's not, abstinence is the only 100% effective way. That's it. That's the only way to totally avoid pregnancy, is not to have heterosexual sexual intercourse. That's it.
And what percentage of people do you think would be willing to live their lives like that?
I don't know. It's probably not that high.
It's probably not that high, especially, excuse me, but I seem to recall that when I was a teenager, just a budding teenager, that my hormones were going berserk. And so were all the boys' hormones going berserk. And you could sit in any middle school class, and the amount of estrogen and testosterone suffusing the atmosphere is mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to tell those kids, just say no.
Well, and I think what's super interesting. So abstinence works for some people, and for some, especially like for youth, it's good. And it's good to emphasize with youth that, abstinence doesn't mean you've never, ever had sex before and you're never, ever going to have sex again. It's a choice that you can make for a period of time. It's a choice that you can make that says, you know what? I don't want to get pregnant. I don't want to get STDs. I know that those can impact me in the long term. I'm worried about that. Whatever. For whatever set of reasons, I don't want to have sex right now. And I'm not going to today or this month or this year. Or, you can make a decision to choose that method for whatever period of time you want, even if you've had sex in the past. It's not, it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. And I think that's something that gets lost in the conversation a little bit. I think the other thing that gets lost is that, when you look at the statistics about youth sexual behavior over time, right? How many, by the time they finish high school, and this is complicated because what is sex? And when you think about LGBTQ kids, like what is sex, right? How do you define that? But that conversation sort of on the side. If you look at the statistics about how many youth have had sex, heterosexual sex, by the time they finish high school, it has barely changed over decades. It has barely changed.
What is it, about 40%?
It's like 47%.
Okay, 47%.
Right? If you look at the national surveys, it's about 47% of youth who have sex by the time they finish high school.
In other words, most graduate from high school
without having sex. And that's, that's their choice. That's a great choice that they made. It's their personal choice.
So my sense is they get a lot of education. My God, I've been railing about the internet. Oh, there's so much information out there. How could a kid possibly not know? I mean, Google it.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that they don't know?
I had the most interesting. I don't usually get phone calls in my office, but every once in a while somebody finds my phone number and gets through to me, like a patient or, somebody who has a question. And yesterday I happened to get a call, and I won't go into the issue that the person was dealing with, but it was like a medical issue. And I said, look, I'm not a medical provider, but I can tell you what I know as an educator. And, and through the course of the conversation, I don't know exactly how old this person is, but they sounded like they were probably a young adult, probably in college or older. And at one point during the conversation, he said to me, and we were just talking about condoms. Okay. We weren't even talking about specific, really detailed health issues. He said, I'm really nervous to search for that. I feel really uncomfortable searching for that. Right? That's what he said to me. This is a person who's calling me and using medical terms on the phone. And, he's empowered enough to be picking up the phone to call me. And he doesn't feel comfortable searching. So there's that.
Okay.
And then there's also, if you search for sexual health terms, what do you think comes up?
Porn.
When you Google those things?
Porn.
Right.
Porn.
Right. porn, and then Yahoo Answers is like the second thing, you know, and we all know how reliable the information on Yahoo Answers is. So it's not easy for people do think that youth can just find this information. It's really not that easy to find reliable information.
Okay. This is reliable information right here. Katie Horowitz, Vice President of Education for Planned Parenthood of Western PA. We've got some questions coming in by email. Roger asks, the public schools you are allowed in, are they mostly urban? Do you get into suburban and rural schools? Any nasty experiences with religious crazies and ignoramuses in public schools?
So we actually, I would say yes, it mostly is in urban schools, but again, I can't say that that's, all I can say is that we are all located here, and so this is really where we end up focusing.
They're here. They're just around the corner here in downtown Pittsburgh.
Yeah. But we are in some suburban schools. We are in some rural schools too. There are some places, there's some places like an hour outside of the city and even up to like an hour and a half outside of the city that we've gone to. And as far as receiving pushback, so one thing that's really interesting, I'll just say, I expected when I started this job to receive a lot of calls from parents or a lot of concern from parents. In my 5.5 years, I think that I've talked to 2 who were
absolutely opposed to what you were doing.
And the interesting thing is I wouldn't even say absolutely opposed. We had a conversation. There was one that was really concerned about his daughter because he came from a Christian family and he was worried about certain aspects of what we were going to be talking about. And I had a whole conversation with him about how we approach things. We're really talking about relationships. We're trying to give these kids information so that they make healthy decisions. And I'm very happy and proud and thrilled that, after we got off the phone, he was okay with it. His daughter, he was okay with it. His daughter came to my class and it was great,
I would imagine there's an opt-out thing.
Yes,
that the schools
get permission slips. Yes, the schools get permission slips from parents. They send home letters. There's parents are definitely in the loop about what's going on.
And you have a sense of how many are opting out?
I don't. It's not very many. It's not very many.
Because when you go in, the class looks full.
Yeah, the class looks full. I mean, if any are opting out, I'm not hearing too much about it. So it's very few. But I mean, we have, we've definitely, the problem I think is that when this bubbles up, there are people who are detractors that hear about it and they do come sometimes. And again, I think the unfortunate thing about that is that they're very loud when they come, and they don't represent the majority, I don't think. And actually, I don't know because because there have been all kinds of studies that have come out that parents support this.
Yes.
But anyways, they don't represent the majority. They can be loud, though.
Okay, Bill's got a problem with our 47% engaging in sex out of high school because he says, what's the definition used? If oral sex is not defined as sex, by young people seem to think it's really not sex or something. And you would agree with that? I would guess, he said, if you factored in how many of these kids have engaged in oral sex, that percentage would be much higher.
Oh, I'm sure he's right about that. I think what Bill brings up is a really good point about the way these surveys are done and the way these definitions are. I hope that as we see people more and more understanding what an issue this is, I hope that the surveys reflect more of the diversity of experiences that people have, because for me the biggest issue, what he's saying, it may be true, but for me the biggest issue is our LGBTQ kids, because I don't think they are represented at all in these surveys, and it's really upsetting to me because their experience is extremely important, extremely valid, and I don't think it gets reflected right now.
But when you go in and do your thing in the schools, you do bring in those.
Oh yeah, we're very inclusive. Yeah, we're very inclusive.
And you don't get titters from the kids.
Even when we do, it's a teaching moment, right? It's a moment to be able to talk about it and to kind of dispel some of that.
And these are co-ed classes.
Yeah, we mostly teach in co-ed classes. And it's interesting. We've had a lot of conversation about this recently. We think it's really important for the youth to be able to have these conversations in mixed gender groups.
Because, it again underscores what you're saying. There's nothing to be, this is basic human behavior.
It's how we all came
we
to
all
be.
got here. If that's shameful, then something's weird.
Right.
You have these, I have a packet of little cards that Planned Parenthood has. And here's some questions. On the front, this one says, do condoms really break? What do I do if that happens? So is that the kind of question that a kid might have?
Yeah,
right,
that's common.
right,
That's
right.
a common question.
And then you turn it over thinking, well, it'll get answered. No, you're just saying if you have a question like that, it's okay to ask someone. In fact, we'll give you a phone number.
Yeah.
Tell me about how this program called IOTAs works. This is coming out of, you've worked so hard on this.
Yeah.
I know. It's okay to ask someone. IOTAs.
So this is our text line. It's a sexual health and relationship text line. So anybody, you don't have to be a youth, you don't have to be in Pittsburgh. Anybody, anywhere can text this phone number 412-424-6827 and ask really any question about sexual health and relationships. And we typically get back to people within 24 hours with our best answer. We get a lot of it's so interesting. We get a lot of relationship questions, which are so tricky.
Yeah. Like what?
I think one of our most common questions is, how do I know if a boy likes me or a girl likes me? How do I know if they like? It's like the sweetest thing on the planet. You get it, and you're like, oh, your heart just goes out. You're like, oh, this kid. They're so, you feel it.
Yeah,
that's one of our most common questions.
And what the hell is the answer to that?
Oh, geez, don't even.
God.
We try to just encourage them to pick up on the signs, pay attention if they're, are they making eye contact with you? Are they finding excuses to talk to you? Are they, we give them these little tips about how do you interpret that? And it's really cute. But we also get a lot of sexual health questions. We get a lot of pregnancy scares are a very big reason that people text us. Questions about STDs.
And we keep saying STDs, and it occurs to me there might be somebody out there who doesn't know what sexually transmitted disease.
Yeah, so any disease that's transmitted sexually.
Sexually.
Yeah.
Well, some of the questions you have on the cards, I'm not sure if I'm ready to have sex. How can I tell?
Yeah.
Wow, that's loaded.
Big question.
And
that's the
loaded.
thing. A lot of these questions are very... there's a lot of values implicit in a lot of these questions.
Yes.
Right? And
So what do? You don't give it. Oh, you're ready to have sex. You would never, ever do something like that. So your approach is to give the questioner the skills required to ferret out the answer themselves.
Yes. When we get a question like that, which is a pretty common question. We really return the question with questions. We don't answer the question. We give them questions to ask themselves, and a lot of that is, who are you? How do you think of yourself? How do you what are your values? What are your family's values? What do you think is important? And there are a lot of questions that go into whether a person's ready.
Listening to you, it strikes me that what you're saying is you're all who you are. There's no blanket rule that applies to everybody,
right.
Which is why the abstinence only thing is so sort of disrespectful as well as stupid. So the thing I get from your approach is knowledge, a basic, what the hell is going on with your body and what happens in sex, but also empowerment, it seems like.
Yeah.
Which, man, that's a whole new idea, because I'm of a generation that never got any of that.
Right.
And I have to tell you, I've thought, since looking at some of what you're involved in, man, my life literally would have been different if someone like you had come. I'm not kidding.
Thanks, Lynn. That's really
Yeah.
nice to hear.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's what that's what we hope. You know, I think the other thing is, like, coming back again from a public health, like with my public health hat on, there's a technique called motivational interviewing that works with people by asking them questions about their risk behaviors and asking them to think about what amount of risk are they willing to accept? What kinds of steps could they start to make changes in their life? And this technique uses, again, questions. You ask the person questions and you ask them to think and to come themselves to an answer that works for them. You know? And
this is the skill that is being lost in every aspect of our lives. Well, I read on the internet, instead of just thinking for yourself.
And it actually works. Like, when people make these decisions for themselves, if I were to come in and say to a group of students, don't have sex, don't do it, it's terrible for you, don't do it. Not only, everything else aside, all the other ideas we might have about why that's negative aside, the problem is also that it doesn't work. They won't listen because they didn't come to it on their own. That's not the decision that they came to on their own. So when you work with people, not just youth, but everybody, when you work with people to come to a decision on their own about how to take care of themselves, they stick with it better. They do it, you know.
It's not imposed from high up.
Right.
It's
from within, and it's theirs, you know. And I think when you work with youth that way, when you work with people that way, not only is it so much more respectful, but it's better for the public health. It lets us all be healthier, you know, and safer and happier and all of those things.
Well, you know, and when I grew up, access to pornography was, slim to none. Pornography was like maybe finding someone's father's Playboy, under the mattress.
Right.
But today, wow. And the depiction of sex in almost every goddamn movie you go to, in every TV show now, are so just right. It would have been porn in my day, right out there, that I wonder, do you think that's helpful or harmful to like a 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old kid to seemingly think they know a lot about what happens with sex?
I think it's really confusing for
Really
them.
confusing.
Yeah, I think so. Because, they see these depictions in TV or, in advertising. I mean, I challenge anybody to drive on your commute home today and see if you can get home without seeing sex being used to sell something. You can't, unless you have a really short commute. You can't. And I think,
well, the sex is almost always a woman's body.
Right. And it's almost always a woman's body, almost always.
Yeah.
And I think it's super confusing for the youth because they're seeing that stuff, they're seeing all of that, and they're seeing pornography. Kids are like 11 when they see pornography for the first time, a lot of them, which is shocking to people.
Yeah.
But that's the age that they're seeing it, and that's their first impression of sex and sexuality, And pornography can be very aggressive. It can be very, there's a lot in pornography that is not a good depiction of a healthy sexual relationship between two people.
And so I think young boys and girls who are seeing that, and understandably maybe trying to mimic it when
it's rough. And and especially when they're not, I think, when we're able to have these conversations with them, when we teach, we often talk about, listen, if you have seen any pornography or sexually explicit materials, this is often in high school that we're talking about this. we want you to know that like that's not real life. Just like in the movies, you know, they use all kinds of makeup, they use CGI, they use all these things in films to make things into a fantasy, right? And it's the same exact thing with sexual imagery. They're not seeing a depiction of reality, you know. And we really try to emphasize that. So I think the problem is, you know, all of that imagery minus any real conversation about it is where you have the problem, when there's that vacuum of reliable
and that's a
information.
reality for, I hate to think how millions upon millions upon millions of young Americans.
A lot of people, a lot of young Americans. Yeah.
Brooke wants to know, could your guest once and for all debunk the lies and myths surrounding Planned Parenthood and abortion? Federal funding seems to be pivot on that one issue.
I can try.
Go for it.
If this does it, I'll be so. I can't even tell you how much better.
All. So we will never again. You're going to do it right here. Here she is.
Thank you for your question, Brooke. $0 from federal funding go to abortion. We do not use federal funding for abortion. The federal funding that we receive is through programs like Title X and Medicaid, and it reimburses us for services. So just like a person would go to the doctor and get a flu shot, and Medicaid would reimburse the doctor for the time the doctor spent, for the flu shot itself, for, you know, all of those things, that's the same for us. We provide services and we get reimbursed by Medicaid or by Title X. We are not able to move money around within our organization. In fact, the abortion services are entirely separate from what we call our family planning program. So those funds are completely separate. There's no overlap. We don't receive federal funds for abortion. And it's not true when people say that we do, or that the money can be moved around. It's just false.
Yeah. Oh, also, I'm being told that HHS thing comes out and says that it defines life as beginning at conception. Now, you know, here again, the world's religions don't agree on this. Mm-hmm. This is somebody's belief.
It's very complicated. I mean, I just think everybody has the right to, you know,
yes.
Everybody has the right to make a decision about how they feel about this.
Right, but this mandating of what women and their partners are allowed to do is so. I thought we were the land of the free. There's nothing free going on here in regard to women. This, you know, the phrase war on women, I thought initially when I heard it was a little over the top. It ain't over the top at all anymore. Yeah. Not with the current administration. They are just find it appalling that women would have control of their own bodies.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. I can't.
Is there any place where they do this to men?
Not that I know.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Is there any place where you guys would end up unable to access health care because the government said you can't?
This stuff with contraception, you know, it comes back up. We think we're done with it. It comes back up. I think people should have access to contraception to use it to prevent unplanned pregnancy. I obviously strongly believe that. But aside from that, people use hormonal birth control for a number of medical reasons that aren't even related to unplanned pregnancy. Right. So even if you have an objection based on using contraception to prevent a pregnancy, there are a lot of people that use it for endometriosis, that use it for ovarian cysts, that use it for all of these medical conditions and really rely on it. I mean, really, really need it for their quality of life and for their health. And you know, those are the people that are also being denied access to this medication. It's a medicine, you know, that people are using. The news now of the Harvey Weinstein or Steen, however it's pronounced, and all these actresses coming out. It seems like he mostly preyed on 20 to 25-year-olds. They are all in that sort of.
And I've been amazed at, according to their accounts, how they said no. Because back in my day, I don't know that a woman felt she could half the time.
Right.
Not with a man of that power, not when he was. And I see progress in that.
Yeah.
So when a guy comes out in his bathrobe and says, "Give me a massage," and the answer is no, that's amazing to me, because back in my day, a woman would have.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, one thing that we're working on that I think is really interesting is not just like, we definitely need to keep working on assertiveness and how do you say no and how do you communicate what you want and what you don't want, all of that. But also, how do you hear no as a man or as anybody? How do you hear no and accept it? Because it's a rejection. It's a rejection when you hear no.
Yes.
And it can be really hard to hear no. And I think especially, our violence prevention programming, that's actually a really big focus of it, is working with boys around toxic masculinity and around these issues of if I accept a no, I'm less of a man, kind of a thing. That's toxic. That's a really toxic attitude.
Do you think
it's violence?
It's prevalent. Do you think?
I think it's pretty prevalent. Yeah.
I think it's pretty prevalent too. So the idea that when it comes to birth control, that it's falls in a woman's lap.
Yeah, that's also tough. This is part of the reason we also, the co-ed thing, back to the co-ed classes thing. That's another part of the reason that we really think it's important to have mixed gender classes when we're talking about these things, because if you just teach contraception to people who are female, then, you're leaving out a whole group of people that really need this information and need to be
part
true
of the
partners, true partners in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This sense that it's just the woman's responsibility. Even rape becomes the women's responsibility.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. You see that a lot. You see the victim blaming. You see the things that,
So when you go into a class, how long are you there? Do you spend a week? Or, it's an hour, obviously, maybe like an hour class. And how many hours do you get in?
It depends. It totally depends on the school or the site and what they have time for. We try to encourage, our sort of foundational curriculum that we teach is like 8 to 10 lessons. We have 10, but we can kind of pare it down to 8. And we try to encourage schools to do that many. If they can't, that's okay. We'll come in and do a session or 2 sessions. If they just need like birth control covered, if they just need STDs covered, we can come and do that as part of the health class. But we really encourage, if we're going to do that, we're hoping that as part of the health curriculum, they have a lot more sexual health content that they're also teaching, and relationship.
The relationship thing is, to me, the brilliant and maybe most important thing.
It's super important. And that's why,
So when is the right time for a parent to talk to or make things available? What would you do? Say you have a child. What are you going to... Do you have children?
No, I don't have children yet.
Okay.
I think that one thing that we talk about is, a lot of times people talk about the talk with a capital T. I had the talk. We say it should be talks with an S, right? It should be many talks over much time. And we think that it's important really to start talking to kids at a very young age about relationships, about body autonomy, that their body is theirs, and that if someone wants to touch their body in a way that they're not comfortable with, that they have the right to say no. They have the right to tell them they don't want to be touched that way. We think it's important to talk about the medical terms for genitals and for body parts.
Don't use these silly little
No, because the problem with that, and I understand why. I get it.
You know what? That goes into the shame thing,
right?
Doesn't it?
Yes, it's related.
It's like you
to
can't
the shame
even
thing.
speak about these things.
And the danger is that then a child, God forbid, but something happens to a child and they can't tell anybody about it because they have this shame, or they don't even have the language to say, I was touched, on my penis, or I was touched on my vagina. Right.
I got to tell you something funny. In my family, growing up in the 50s, different families have different words for I have to urinate, right? Right. But I think most say pee. Right. Now, the P is short for piss. Right. That's where P comes from. Piss. My family, and I didn't know it till I went out into the world and happened to say, for some reason in my family, we couldn't say P because I think someone was aware it stood for piss. So in my family, the P turned into a D.
Oh, interesting.
Have you ever heard of anybody saying, I have to D?
I can't know.
No! Hello, you're looking at her. And my sister and brother, too. I have to D. Now, that said, outside of our house would yield.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
That's really
I know.
Lynn.
So these euphemisms are they're just stupid.
Yeah. And this isn't to say, like, I could see somebody watching and saying, well, like, these are sensitive topics, right? This is sensitive stuff. We need our kids to be appropriate. We need
private.
They're private. And I don't think, there's a whole conversation, and it has to be a whole conversation. I think that's part of the difficulty about, like, we can talk about these, and here's when you talk about it. Here are the times when it's good to talk about it, and here are the times when it's not. It's just like we can't walk outside in our birthday suit and stroll down the street, right? That's not okay. But that doesn't mean that it's not okay to take our clothes off when we need to take a shower, or to, there are places and times for public and private. And I think having a real conversation with children are so smart. They're so sensitive. They understand so much. And I think when you explain it to them fully, they get it. They understand. They get it. And they need the language. They need to not feel that you can be private about something without being shameful about it, right?
The whole issue of privacy has been taken a hit these days. People's, I don't think, have much expectation of privacy anymore. And people themselves, young people especially, with the sexting. Do you get into that?
Oh, yeah, we talk about that.
All right, so what the hell's going on with that stupidity?
Yeah, there's a lot of it. There really is a lot of it. Yeah, there's a whole lot of it. And I think it's tricky because I think if a lot of people think back to their youth, the difference between what people did passing notes or talking or, it's not that different. It's just that the technology is different. It's just that the technology is really different. We just didn't have cameras in our pockets that could magically send pictures across the room, when we were younger. And now we do. And I think, I think it's important to talk to kids about the fact that once you send that picture, you can't get it back. There's no getting it back. It's out there. It's out there. And unless you, just like any intimate act, just like kissing somebody or just like any intimate act, if you send this picture out, you are entrusting this person really with your body, And so you have to talk to kids about that, and you have to really emphasize that once it's out there, And at the same time, I think the nervousness that adults feel about it and sort of the freak out that adults feel about it is also a little, it's a little exaggerated because, they're sending pictures. It's not great. They probably should be careful about it, But I think the hysteria about it is a little bit overblown sometimes, probably.
Really?
I
Okay.
do. Yeah.
I'm an old fart, okay? I am.
I think just because I also think that if they're doing that, I don't think that's leading to sex. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that that has a direct link to increased sexual behavior necessarily. I think that, I don't know. I think if you think about adolescent behavior, it's not surprising that they're doing it. They just need to be careful and probably, they need adults to talk to them about that.
Well, we know now that the brain, the part of the brain that is the most developed part of the brain, does not stop developing until well into the 20s.
Yeah.
Right? The part that makes judgments.
Right.
So that's the other thing that's so
Yes.
scary, is that when you are most hormonal, most, touch will make you, just, I gotta have it.
Right.
Most sexual, most this and that.
Right.
You do not even have the capacity to think
Right.
as well as you're going to have in 10 years.
Right. And I guess that's why I'll come back in and say again, like, this education that we do is what helps these kids to think through. The problem is that those hormones make the kids, like you're saying, like they're just like, they can't think straight. And so what you have to do, just like just like if you're in the military, right, you do drills, you practice before you're in an actual war situation because emotions are high, things. You have to have practiced beforehand to think through what are those steps going to be so that you can more automatically do them in the moment. So that's the same with this information that we share with them. We want them to think about it ahead of time and practice ahead of time. How am I going to stick to my limits? I have limits. How am I going to stick to them in a situation where they're being challenged?
Okay, and let me throw in alcohol.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, right. And that throws everything off. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a challenging for kids. It's
It sure is.
hard.
Always has been.
Yeah.
And I think more than ever now, because the environment is so polluted in a way. I mean, in my time, it was too much in the dark. We were, clueless and shamed. Mm-hmm. But now it's
Right.
It's gone the other way,
Right.
I guess. This is Planned Parenthood. So next time you hear somebody talking about Planned Parenthood like it is toxic, understand that what they're about is ensuring that no woman will be faced with the decision of terminating a pregnancy because she wouldn't have gotten pregnant if she didn't want to. You can stand with Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania tomorrow night and stand with City Paper because we're getting together and you're invited. It's going to be a party. Let me give you all the stuff. What does this mean? They're going to play Sex Jeopardy?
Yeah, we have Sex Jeopardy.
What? Oh, so that's just all the questions are sex. Oh, do you have it?
It's sexual
I would
health
love
Jeopardy.
Oh, because I'm a Jeopardy nut.
Yeah.
Are the questions tough?
Some of them are tough.
Yeah. Okay. There's crafts. There's Sex Jeopardy. There's Franctuary Food Truck going to be there, and there's music performances, live music, 2 complimentary beers with your admission, which is $5 with a student ID and $10 for the rest. And it is at the Glitter Box Theater on Melwood in Oakland. Starts at 6:30, goes all the way to 10. That's tomorrow. So I stand with Planned Parenthood, a glitter box bash going on. And while I'm doing this, I'm being told to do this too. And I'm inviting you to another party. Yep. This one is the Best of Pittsburgh party. This is when, City Paper comes out and they have the best, this restaurant, the best spa, the best blah, blah, blah. And then we get all the people who won together and we have a big party, and all the restaurants that won provide food. And this is happening next Thursday night. You are invited again to the Ace Hotel. This is that's technically East Liberty. Shady Side? East Liberty.
East Liberty.
East Liberty. Sliberty.
East Liberty.
And so you can sample the food and blah, 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 and enjoy live performances too. And there's a silent disco, and I want to thank one of you for telling me what that is. That means that you wear headphones and you and only you hear the music that you are dancing to. So on the dance floor, it could be a whole bunch of people listening to a whole bunch of different stuff, and you can't hear a thing. I don't get it. There is an admission charge. I don't know what it is, but if you call ahead or go ahead to www.cooltix.com and get your tickets there, you get $10 off admission if you put Lynn Cullen in the promo code box. Okay? Lynn Cullen will be worth $10 to you. So remember that. Again, it's CoolTix, CoolTix.com. And Glitter Bash tomorrow night, standing with the wonderful people at Planned Parenthood. Katie Horowitz, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lynn. This was
Boy,
wonderful.
I mean, any school that has the smarts to let you and your people in, God bless them, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll be back tomorrow, okay? Toodle.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.